We live in a world powered by potential. Every tool we build, every platform we launch, every idea we spread, carries with it the capacity to create or destroy. That's the paradox of progress. The more powerful we become, the more essential it is to ask ourselves not just, can we do this? But should we? We've been taught to chase efficiency, scale, and influence. But those things aren't inherently good. They're multipliers. They make what's already there stronger, louder, faster. If we inject compassion, responsibility, and integrity into what we create, those things multiply too. But if we bring greed, ego, and neglect into our systems, then what we build becomes dangerous. Good and evil are not abstract. They are outcomes. They are the logical result of small decisions made by individuals who either chose to look the other way or chose to lead with courage. You don't have to be malicious to cause harm. Sometimes all it takes is apathy. Sometimes all it takes is saying, "That's not my job." But here's the truth. It is your job. If you're building something, anything, you are responsible for what it does in the world. If you're leading a team, you're shaping not just products but people. If you're making decisions that touch lives, even indirectly, then your hands are not clean until your conscience is clear. There's a temptation to believe that good and evil are matters for philosophers or movies. But in reality, they show up in user interfaces, they show up in algorithms, they show up in what data we collect and what privacy we ignore. They show up in how we treat people when no one's watching and how we justify shortcuts because everyone else does it. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware, because awareness breeds responsibility, and responsibility breeds action. The more power you hold, the more attention you need to pay. And if you don't lead with values, you will be led by them. Someone else's, somewhere down the line, when it's too late to turn back. So here's the challenge: build with intention, lead with clarity, decide what kind of impact you want to leave behind, and then reverse. Engineer your work from that vision. Choose to be part of the solution, not just a spectator. And above all, remember this: you don't need permission to do the right thing. The greatest legacy isn't what we launch, it's how it affects lives. And the most important product we'll ever build isn't a device or an app. It's our own character. Let's design it with care. Let's ship it with purpose. Let's debug it constantly, because at the end of the day, good and evil aren't abstract. They're personal, and they're up to you. Innovation is a mirror that reflects the character of its creator. Every breakthrough, whether it's a line of code, a startup idea, a revolutionary device, or a disruptive platform, is a neutral force until the intent behind it steers its direction. When we create, we are not just solving problems, we are influencing behavior, shaping society, and setting the tone for future generations. That is a power not to be taken lightly. The power to uplift lies in designing with empathy. Think of the tools that have revolutionized accessibility: speech-to-text software for the hearing impaired, screen readers for the visually challenged, platforms that give marginalized voices a chance to speak. These innovations aren't just clever, they are fundamentally good. They increase human capacity, they connect, they bridge, they empower. The same tool in the wrong hands can have an opposite effect. A social media algorithm designed to personalize engagement can easily be manipulated to polarize. A facial recognition system meant to enhance security can be twisted into a tool for surveillance and discrimination. A data analytics platform that reveals consumer preferences can quickly cross into invasion of privacy. What begins as progress ends up becoming a weapon. When innovation lacks moral clarity, technology amplifies intent. It does not invent it. A hammer can build a house or break a window. A smartphone can facilitate education or spread misinformation. The direction it takes is always a function of the values embedded by its creator, and that means we must take responsibility for the full arc of what we unleash. The desire to solve a problem is noble, but the purpose behind the solution must be clear. Is it about helping people or manipulating them? Is it about serving society or serving self-interest? Is it about leaving the world better or just leaving richer? These questions aren't philosophical luxuries. They are strategic essentials. They define what kind of impact we'll leave behind. There is no such thing as just tech. Every product has a moral footprint. Every design has consequences. Every disruption creates ripple effects that either elevate or erode the human experience. The line between uplifting and undermining is thinner than most want to admit, and it's often drawn by the decisions made in early meetings, quiet design sessions, and overlooked documentation. When the race to ship overshadows the need to reflect, the damage begins. When we value user acquisition more than user dignity, we erode trust. When we define success by scale instead of sustainability, we lose the plot. It is in those quiet corners where ethical leadership is tested and where the difference between good and evil begins to take root. This battle within innovation is not always dramatic. It's subtle. It's in choosing transparency over cleverness. It's in deciding to notify users about what you collect instead of burying it in terms and conditions. It's in asking who could this harm instead of just how do we monetize this. Those decisions add up. They accumulate into culture, and culture defines whether what we're building is part of the solution or part of the problem. Think about the trajectory of history's greatest innovations. The printing press empowered mass literacy and also propaganda. Nuclear technology ushered in energy independence and mass destruction. The internet democratized access to knowledge and created new platforms for addiction, deception, and polarization. The pattern is clear: innovation is never pure. It always contains dual potential. Whether it uplifts or undermines depends entirely on who is holding the steering wheel. The innovators of today are not just solving problems, they are curating futures, and every line of code, every launch, every decision made behind closed doors contributes to that future. The battle between good and evil is not waged in headlines. It's waged in product roadmaps, in design frameworks, in the ethical training of teams, and in the gut instincts of leaders who choose courage over convenience. We must stop treating ethics as an afterthought and begin treating it as infrastructure. We do not bolt morality onto innovation. We build it in from the beginning. We question assumptions. We stress test our own incentives. We challenge ourselves not just to imagine what could go right, but to anticipate what could go wrong. Every invention is a fork in the road. It can elevate or exploit, heal or harm, unite or divide. The outcome is not inevitable. It's intentional. And that intention starts with the people who dare to ask not only what can we build, but why should we build it? That is the real battle, the battle within. And it is the responsibility of every innovator to fight it well. Every organization has a mission statement. Every leader speaks of vision. Every startup deck is filled with bold ambitions to change the world. But between the pitch and the product, between the vision and the version release, lies a landscape of quiet decisions. These are not the dramatic, headline-grabbing moments. They are the subtle trade-offs, the hidden lines of code, the design choices, and the corporate compromises. These moments don't shout, but they shape everything. Hiring a data analyst and choosing not to give them ethical training is a quiet decision. Designing a recommendation engine that rewards engagement over accuracy is a quiet decision. Ignoring the mental health implications of your platform because retention numbers look good in the short term is a quiet decision. These decisions aren't evil by design, but they bend the moral compass by degrees. And over time, a few degrees off course leads you to a destination you never intended to reach. Most people don't wake up and decide to be unethical. They compromise. One shortcut here, one blind spot there, one decision made under pressure. Because deadlines are real, investors are watching, and competition is fierce. That's how good people end up building things that produce harmful consequences. The line between right and wrong doesn't show up in dramatic red ink. It fades in grayscale as you pass it. The uncomfortable truth is that harm is often engineered unintentionally. When companies choose not to test for bias in their algorithms, it's usually not malice, it's omission. When platforms delay moderating harmful content to protect ad revenue, it's not always a conspiracy, it's prioritization. When teams avoid hard conversations about the social impact of their products, it's not always neglect, it's fatigue. But intention doesn't erase impact, and silence does not absolve responsibility. Every team has a moment when they realize that what they're building is working, but it's also causing friction in the real world. That's the moral crossroads. What happens next defines the line. Do you double down and scale regardless, or do you pause and recalibrate? Do you listen to the data, or do you listen to your users? Do you fix what's broken, or do you reframe the metrics so the problem disappears on paper? Culture is not built in all hands meetings. It's built in how we respond to these quiet decisions. It's built when a product manager says, "This feature works great, but could it be misused?" It's built when a designer challenges a layout because it feels manipulative. It's built when an engineer flags a privacy issue, even if it means delaying the sprint. These aren't big gestures. They're small standpoints, and they make all the difference. Leaders often talk about values: integrity, trust, responsibility. But values aren't real until they cost something, until they slow something down, until they force a rewrite, until they put you at odds with the easy route. If a value only applies when it's convenient, it's not a value, it's a decoration. The real test comes when the team is tired, the quarter is closing, and the pressure to compromise is louder than the voice of principle. You don't need an ethics officer to do the right thing. You need a culture that empowers everyone to ask the uncomfortable questions before the product goes live. Ethics isn't a department, it's a mindset. It's a reflex that must be baked into the DNA of how you build, ship, and scale. And that reflex gets strengthened or weakened, one quiet decision at a time. The loudest voices in the room aren't always the most ethical. It's often the soft-spoken engineer who sees the vulnerability. The junior designer who feels the layout is deceptive. The operations lead who notices the data collection is overreaching. But their concerns get buried if the culture isn't listening. When ambition drowns out awareness, harm is inevitable, even if the original intent was pure. The most dangerous organizations aren't led by villains. They're led by dreamers who don't stop to reflect, by teams that confuse success with scale, by builders who believe the ends justify the means. They aren't loud about being wrong, but they're quiet about what's missing, and that quiet, sustained silence becomes complicity. Integrity doesn't announce itself. It whispers in the moments no one is watching. It shows up when you're editing a product feature at 2 a.m., when you're writing a privacy policy, when you're reviewing user complaints that no one else wants to deal with. That's where the real work happens. That's where the right side of the line gets drawn. not in press releases, but in private decisions that ripple outward into the world. True integrity is not forged in applause or recognition. It is revealed when no one is looking, when the spotlight is off, when the pressure is high but the audience is absent. It is built in boardrooms after hours, in home offices where decisions are made quietly, in corners of servers that store user data, in line items of code that shape the behavior of millions. Integrity, at its core, is about what you do when you could cut corners and get away with it. A developer discovers a way to collect more user data than necessary. It could supercharge analytics, boost engagement, increase monetization, but it violates the company's own stated policy. No one would notice, at least not immediately. There is no audit scheduled. No customer will complain because they won't know. The choice to say no, to not exploit the loophole, is integrity. A manager realizes a competitor is bleeding talent and can recruit their key engineer by offering a backdoor deal that undermines a non-compete clause. The opportunity is tempting. It would save months of hiring, but it erodes trust and ethics. Choosing to respect the boundary, despite personal gain, is integrity. An executive reviews quarterly financials and sees that a technical adjustment in accounting will present numbers in a more favorable light to investors. It's not illegal. In fact, it's a common tactic. But it distorts the reality of what's happening inside the business. The choice to be transparent, even if it disappoints stakeholders, is integrity. A leader is given credit for a project they didn't fully lead. Their name is the one being celebrated, but the weight of the work was carried by someone else. The temptation is to say thank you and move on, but calling attention to the team, giving recognition where it is truly due, that's integrity. In the fast-paced rhythm of building products, launching initiatives, scaling operations, there are daily opportunities to compromise. Most of these decisions don't come with alarms. They come quietly, wrapped in justification, tied to metrics, reinforced by short-term success. What defines integrity is the willingness to resist the easy justification in favor of the uncomfortable truth. Many companies publish values. They etch them into the walls, include them on the website, preach them in town halls. But values without accountability are branding, not belief. The test isn't what your company says it believes. It's what your people do when faced with a moral decision that no one else sees. It's whether employees feel empowered to speak up without retaliation. It's whether feedback is met with reflection or resistance. Private accountability creates public integrity. In organizations where integrity is real, whistleblowers are not feared. They are valued. Corrections are not viewed as weakness. They are seen as growth. Leaders don't just apologize when they are caught. They reflect before they act. Mistakes are owned quickly, lessons are shared openly, and fixes are implemented structurally. This culture is not enforced by surveillance. It's sustained by trust. The biggest ethical failures in history were rarely caused by villains. They were caused by systems that incentivized silence, by cultures that rewarded results at any cost, by leaders who valued compliance over conscience. The people within those systems didn't have bad intentions. They lacked support to make good decisions. Without a culture of private accountability, even good people can drift into bad behavior. Integrity is inconvenient. It slows progress. It complicates meetings. It raises uncomfortable questions. But it is the only real competitive advantage that compounds. Customers trust brands that stay true to their word. Employees stay loyal to leaders who lead with fairness. Stakeholders support organizations that self-correct without pressure. Reputation is not built in a day. but it can be lost in a moment of compromised integrity. The future belongs to organizations that prioritize trust over trend. The builders who consider the downstream effects of every innovation, the creators who resist designing for addiction, the marketers who don't manipulate pain points, the technologists who believe that doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. This begins not with grand gestures, but with quiet, consistent private decisions rooted in principle. Every choice leaves a trail, every shortcut signals permission, every blind eye becomes precedent. You don't need to be perfect, but you must be aware. You don't need to get it right every time, but you must be willing to own it when you don't. Accountability starts not with policy, but with a person asking, is this the right thing to do, even if no one sees it? That question is the core of integrity, and it's where all trust begins. The most important battle we face in life isn't fought in courts or boardrooms or on social media. It's not about who has more power or louder opinions. The real struggle is fought in silence, in solitude, within the space between who we are and who we pretend to be. It's the tension between our higher self and our weaker impulses, between the part of us that wants to create and the part that wants to destroy, between courage and fear, service and selfishness, truth and denial. You can build an empire, launch a company, lead a movement, and still lose that internal war. You can be revered by millions, but if your private self is plagued with duplicity, if you compromise your own values to maintain the illusion of success, then you haven't conquered the world. You've lost yourself to it. The battle is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It looks like deciding whether to speak up when it's unpopular or stay silent to protect your image. It feels like scrolling endlessly through comparisons while pretending to be above envy. It hides in the split second between your first instinct to criticize and your choice to uplift. These are the micro moments where the inner conflict plays out. The villain isn't always another person. Sometimes it's the version of you that's fueled by resentment, ego, or insecurity. The one who wants to be right more than they want to learn. The one who masks fear as sarcasm. The one who tears down others for being bold, simply because you were too scared to be. Good isn't always heroic. Sometimes it's humble. Good looks like taking responsibility when you could shift the blame. It looks like forgiveness when revenge would be more satisfying. It looks like turning away from self, righteousness, and toward curiosity. The internal war is not about dramatic gestures. It's about small, repeated decisions to align with character rather than impulse. That battle intensifies under pressure. When stress rises, when failure feels near, when your career or relationships are under threat, the temptation to let the darker parts of yourself take over becomes louder. The desire to lie to protect your pride, to lash out to regain control, to manipulate to avoid consequence. It all surfaces. These are the moments that reveal whether we've trained ourselves to respond from strength or from fear. The line between good and evil is not drawn between nations or parties or belief systems. It runs through every human heart. You don't graduate from that struggle, you manage it. You recognize that there are parts of you that, left unchecked, can ruin your integrity, and there are parts of you that, when cultivated, can transform your life and others. Self-awareness is your first weapon in this war. Without it, you'll blame the world for conflicts you haven't resolved within. You'll point fingers at injustice while refusing to address your own hypocrisy. You'll wear a mask of virtue while quietly resenting others who reflect your own unhealed wounds. You can't defeat what you won't confront. The internal struggle doesn't disappear with success. In fact, success amplifies it. The more influence you have, the more seductive the shortcuts become. The more admiration you receive, the easier it is to mistake applause for alignment. If your internal compass is not calibrated, power will make you dangerous to others and to yourself. Every day is a decision. Will I lead with empathy or with ego? Will I give grace or seek control? Will I speak the truth or manipulate it to serve my narrative? No one sees these decisions being made, but they define you far more than any resume, headline, or title. You don't need to be perfect, but you must be honest with yourself first. Recognize when your actions are being driven by fear. Identify when you are acting out of insecurity disguised as certainty. Admit when you are protecting your image at the expense of your values. That kind of honesty creates space for transformation. You can't fight this internal war alone forever. You need people who tell you the truth even when it hurts. You need systems that reward integrity over performance. You need habits that reinforce reflection over reaction. The environment you build around you can support or sabotage your inner peace. The greatest legacy isn't what you build externally, it's who you become internally. Winning in the world means nothing if you've lost yourself in the process. Your real power isn't found in domination. It's found in alignment with what you know to be right, even when it costs you. The daily invisible battle within determines whether the life you live will be driven by light or consumed by shadows. Justice is often imagined as a system of penalties and rewards, as a scoreboard where good is rewarded and evil is punished. We see justice as retribution, a way to balance scales, to make sure the guilty suffer consequences and the innocent are vindicated. But true justice goes far deeper than that. It transcends the transactional nature of punishment and shifts toward restoration, healing, and transformation. This perspective is vital because without restoration, punishment becomes a cycle of harm and justice is reduced to mere revenge. When we think about justice in its fullest form, it is about repairing what has been broken. It's about acknowledging the hurt caused and seeking ways to rebuild trust and dignity, not just for victims, but also for those who have caused harm. The goal is not to crush or humiliate, but to enable accountability alongside compassion. This approach requires tremendous courage and wisdom, especially in environments where quick fixes and harsh penalties are often the default. In every community, workplace, or society, justice systems that focus solely on punishment often perpetuate division and resentment. Punishment may deter some bad behavior temporarily, but it rarely addresses underlying causes or leads to meaningful change. When someone is punished without being supported to understand and grow, they are more likely to repeat the same mistakes. The wounds deepen, bitterness grows, and the cycle continues. True justice requires us to see the humanity in all people, even those who have wronged us or others. It asks us to look beyond the act and understand the circumstances, pain, and brokenness that may have contributed to it. This doesn't excuse the behavior, but it reframes it in a way that opens the door for transformation rather than condemnation. Restorative justice practices demonstrate this approach powerfully. They bring together victims and offenders in dialogue, allowing for accountability and empathy to coexist. Victims have the chance to express their pain and be heard. Offenders confront the impact of their actions and commit to making amends. This process builds a foundation for healing that punishment alone cannot provide. It's a model that values reconciliation over retribution and relationship over isolation. In organizations, this principle applies not only to interpersonal conflicts, but also to how mistakes and failures are handled. When a team member makes a significant error, a justice system focused on restoration asks, how can we support growth and prevent recurrence? Rather than who do we blame, a culture that values restoration fosters psychological safety, encouraging people to own their mistakes, learn from them, and innovate without fear of harsh repercussions. Restorative justice also connects to leadership. Leaders who embody this principle resist the urge to wield power through punishment. Instead, they use their influence to cultivate environments where people can face consequences honestly and be given opportunities to improve. This creates trust and loyalty and ultimately more sustainable success. Another dimension of true justice is forgiveness, not as a naive act of forgetting wrongs, but as a conscious choice to release the grip of resentment. Forgiveness is difficult, especially when harm is deep, but it is essential for personal and collective healing. Without forgiveness, we remain trapped in cycles of bitterness that poison our well-being and relationships. Justice that includes forgiveness allows people to move forward, carrying lessons rather than burdens. The legal systems in many parts of the world struggle with this balance. They are often designed for efficiency and control rather than healing. This leads to overcrowded prisons, social marginalization, and lost potential. Reform movements focused on restorative justice challenge us to rethink what it means to truly serve justice. They ask us to envision communities where accountability and empathy coexist, and where the goal is rehabilitation, not just punishment. On an individual level, practicing this understanding of justice transforms how we respond to conflict in our daily lives. Instead of seeking revenge or harboring grudges, we can choose to approach wrongs with a mindset of healing and growth. This doesn't mean allowing abuse or ignoring harm. It means holding people accountable in ways that promote learning and reconciliation rather than perpetuating harm. Justice that transcends punishment also aligns with the principles of leadership in any sphere. Whether business, education, or personal relationships. Leaders who understand this recognize that success is not measured only by immediate results or strict discipline, but by the health of the systems and people they serve. True justice in leadership creates cultures where mistakes are opportunities, where conflict leads to dialogue, and where fairness is experienced as respect and restoration. At the core, this vision of justice demands patience and humility. It requires us to accept complexity, to understand that people are neither wholly good nor evil. It asks us to hold space for imperfection and to invest in long-term healing instead of short-term victory. This is harder work than punishment, but it yields far richer rewards, communities and organizations that are resilient, compassionate, and just. When we embrace justice as restoration, we redefine what it means to hold people accountable. We move from a mindset of condemnation to one of commitment. Commitment to truth, to healing, and to the possibility that even those who have fallen can rise again. This shift is what allows societies to break free from cycles of violence and mistrust, and to build foundations of lasting peace and progress. True justice is not about making people suffer. It's about helping people grow beyond their mistakes. It is a powerful reminder that the ultimate goal of justice is not punishment for its own sake, but the restoration of dignity, trust, and humanity for all involved.